Hey everybody, great to see you. As some of you know, we're in our series called Bank, which was taking a look at our money. And what I want to share with you today comes from, and really this whole series comes from a guy, I've mentioned it before, his name is Andy Stanley. He has a great church down in the Atlanta area. And he's just a brilliant thinker. And about a year or so ago, our teaching team kind of took a look at his stuff and said, we want to share his wisdom and his insight on this issue with you. And so I'm going to do what I don't do very often, but I'm going to lip sync this guy's message for you because it is so good. I mean, what he thought through on this topic is brilliant. And so I want to share that with you today. But here's what I want you to realize. What we've been trying to do in the last couple weeks, Jeremiah talked about it last week, we're trying to contrast two words when it comes to money: giving and generosity. Giving and generosity. They're actually two different things. I think most of us know how to give. In fact, I would argue that all of us know how to give, and we give a lot. When people ask us things, we consider we can give, but being generous is something else. This is a learn how to do. It is not a learn how to do, which would be the giving thing. It's a learn how to be, which is the generosity thing. How do I become a generous person? Not just do giving when I'm asked. And so we're going to kind of look at that. Generosity is more than just random acts of giving. And in fact, it comes with a promise. And this is the promise that comes with generosity. When we become generous, we will give more, save more, and consume less. And according to Jesus, you'll be happier. And that's the promise that I can make you and that God makes us through Scripture. And so I want to kind of jump right into this thing and just say this, that we really believe that this generosity thing, at the very bottom of it is that there has to be some intentionality behind it, and generous people, we would argue, have a plan. It's not something that just kind of happens randomly, but there's a plan behind it. Last week, Jeremiah talked about a plan that a lot of us have, and when it comes to money, we just kind of said, and you guys all kind of nodded your head. I was there with you, and I was nodding my head. It can get pretty crazy, can't it? And we talked about this crazy cycle that basically says when it comes to money, a lot of us do what? We worry. And as a result of our worrying, one of the ways we medicate worry is what? By spending. And when we overspend, we end up in what? In debt. And when we end up into debt, we have no margin, and then that just goes into the crazy cycle again. Remember what we talked about last week for you as are here? We go to worry about future consumption. We consume more than we can afford. We get into consumer debt. We have no margin for future spending, and so we convince ourselves that we have a huge money problem. But the truth of it is that it's not so much a money problem. And we argued last week, you could make 10%, 20%, Jeremiah said, 30% more, and you still find yourself in the crazy cycle. I've done that. I've had my income increase, and I'm still in this crazy overspending cycle. But what spending can be is a self-control issue. Debt is a contentment issue, we argued. And margin is an issue of lack of discipline. And for those of us who would call ourselves Jesus followers, we would say that worry really is not a money issue, but at the core is a spiritual issue. And if you remember this statement, we said that we put our faith in riches instead of the one who richly provides. Some of you remember that statement? It's so tempting to put our faith and put our dreams of happiness in riches, in the things that we can buy, instead of putting our hope for happiness and fulfillment and pleasure on the one who richly provides. Generous people do not assume, here's another concept I want you to think about. Generous people do not assume it's theirs to consume. Okay? We often live under the assumption that if it comes to us, if things come to us, then it's for us. But see, a generous person would flip that and say, wait a minute, just because it comes to me doesn't mean it's all for me. We have bought into the lie also that we are owners, that everything we have is ours. And so we are owners and consumers. And I can guarantee you this, that if we find ourselves in that consumer mindset, we will always be left empty and discontent. Empty and discontent. That's what happens if consumption is what's at the core of our being. We break the insanity cycle not by making more money, which I already said, right? That's not the answer. Not by making more money, but by reprioritizing our finances around generosity. And so Andy teaches this as a definition. We're going to walk through this today, and I think it's really helpful because I think we can actually learn how to become generous. We can actually learn this. He describes generosity this way. Generosity is the premeditated, calculated, designated emancipation of personal assets. And he makes fun of it when he teaches it because it's like something that's crazy. It's hard to remember. But let's just say it one more time. Premeditated, calculated, designated emancipation, or the freedom of your personal assets. So let's just jump right in on the premeditated one. Premeditated. Generosity requires a plan. A lot of you guys in the room may think, you know what, that's not just how I'm wired. Yeah, my wife, she's got to have a plan. My husband, he has to have a plan, but I'm just not wired that way. I would say to you and suggest that everybody has a plan. In fact, Kyle Neighbors, who's our the guy that oversees most of the staff, most of us directly report to him, he says this a lot: you are perfectly aligned to get the results that you are currently getting. So when any of us we're frustrated about what's going on, but we don't really want to change anything, he goes, hey, you're perfectly aligned to get the results. You have a plan. Everybody has a plan. The problem is, if you don't have a plan, you tend to drift, okay? And when you plan, you tend to get good results. When you drift, they tend to be bad results. Have you guys seen that in your life? Not just money, but other things, right? And I would say this: if you've never written down your plan, okay, financially, this is probably what your plan looks like. I'll bet you it looks something like this: consume, save, and give. Consume as much as I can, save if I can, and give what's left over. Now just think about that for a minute. Consume, save, give. Would that describe your plan? Because you've got a plan. You're running a plan whether you're being intentional about it or not. And Andy would say you kind of look like a 3S giver: spontaneous, sporadic, and sparing. So it's like, if I feel good or somebody calls me and kind of makes me feel guilty enough and pushes on me, yeah, I might give, but it's going to happen, whatever the way the wind's blowing, whatever. And it's not going to be very generous. It might be $25 to this charity or a couple dollars to the little girl who, right? You need to have a plan. It needs to be premeditated. The second one is calculated. Premeditated and calculated. Calculating is deciding how much you're going to give. You're going to decide ahead of time how much you're going to give. You decide the amount or the percentage. And I would suggest that percentage is the better way to go. Because when you make more, then you're able to give more, right? As you begin to make more, as you go through life, and you have more to give if you're a percentage giver. Do you remember a couple weeks ago, those of you who were here 2 weeks ago, I shared this amazing quote from Atlantic Magazine a couple years ago. It said, the wealthiest Americans, those with earnings in the top 20%, contributed on average, ready for this? 1.3% of their income. 1.3%. By comparison, Americans at the base of the income pyramid, the bottom 20% of earning, right, donated 3.2% of their income. But regardless, for those of us that are not percentage givers, I'll bet you $100 you're not even aware of what your percentage is. You've never thought about that. It's kind of like, we joke about it at church, but if Jeremiah gives a great message or I give an okay message, you might put a 20 in the plate, right? If it's not that great, maybe a 5, maybe nothing. But if you're a percentage giver, you decide ahead of time what the percentage is going to be. Very, very different. And I would really encourage you to do that. Go home, just take a look at what you spend. It's tax time. You just did it, or you're getting ready to do it, right? Just say, what did I give in charitable giving? What's my income? Do the math. What's your percentage? You'd be surprised. I mean, just check it out. Generous people give before they consume it. So remember that other thing? Consume, save if you can, give what's left. Generous people give first. The whole idea is to reprioritize your finances so that the giving, which is at the bottom of that formula, gets flipped to the top. And you could become a 3P giver, a percentage giver, which we just talked about, a priority giver, which is giving it first, where it's the first priority, and a progressive giver. So as your income increases, you're able to actually give more. Calculated. It means you decide how much, how often you're going to give. Now comes the fun part. You guys like fun stuff? That last part didn't sound too fun, did it? No. Here's the fun part. Designate. This is the third part of the plan. It's premeditated, it's calculated. The third part, designated, where you decide ahead of time where you're going to give. See, that's the fun part. Generous people choose, again, ahead of time where they're going to give. Now, this is really great because I don't know how many of you love it when somebody comes to your door to ask for money. I hate it. I used to really hate it. Actually, I don't anymore. And I'll share you why, but don't you hate that? It's hard because you're trying, oh my gosh, you got to make this decision right now and you feel guilty if you don't. You don't even know what the whole thing, right? But generous people don't feel guilty. You know why? Because they've already decided ahead of time where to give. It's already done. The decision's made. You've already taken your resources and given it before all these people come together. Now, random acts of generosity, I'm all about that. There's no problem with that. And sometimes a kid comes to the door and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. And I give him $10, $20. But it's not about, am I a generous person or not? Because I've already designated before anything else what I'm going to give. So where should I give? Jesus said, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. Some of you have heard that verse before. Jesus said, if you want to know what really matters to you, look at your treasure. We used to say, look at your checkbook. Nobody uses that anymore. Look at your bank account. See where you've spent. Look at your credit card statement, and you can find out where your heart is. Where your treasure is where your heart is. Wherever you're spending your money, your heart is there. If you want to change where your heart is, change where your money goes. Because it works both ways, okay? Give, here's a little formula that will help you. Give from a grateful heart, okay? Give for something that you're grateful for, and give from a broken heart. What are you broken over? If Jesus says, man, pay attention to your heart because that's where your treasure is, then give to the things you're grateful for and give to the things that have broken your heart. I remember years ago being surprised when I stood at the door and I can't even remember. This was a long time ago, but it was profound to me because I felt so different. A kid came to the door and was asking me for money, and I just said, no thanks, not interested. And I didn't feel guilty at all, and that's what was profound because I usually did. And what was different was I had already made the decision to say yes to something else. It was done. It's a huge thing. Generous people never feel guilty about saying no. That's amazing. So, get a plan, right? Put what's normally at the bottom, the giving thing, at the top. Decide how much you're going to give. Calculate it. And decide where. What I'm grateful for, what I'm broken for. Generosity is the premeditated, calculated, designated emancipation, fancy word for freeing up right, of my personal assets. I want to share with you an awesome little story today. It's a video that we shot of a girl that's at part of Kensington. It's the neat part about this, here we are doing a story on bank, right, our money and all that kind of stuff. She's 7. But I think you're going to see why we picked this video. What I want you to watch is this little girl never listened to Andy Stanley's message. And she did the whole thing. So I just want you to watch this. Just watch this whole thing play out. She doesn't even have any money. But look how she plays this thing out in the story.
My name is Leah Lynn Bosman. I am 7 years old. I have red hair and it's long and curly about down to my stomach. I have blue eyes and I have freckles on my face. I have 2 sisters, Anna and Nora. When I grow up, I want to be a professional basketball player. If I can't do that, then I want to be a doctor, so if people are hurt, I can always try to help them. My dad works a lot, but when he comes home, he makes all the time he has about me, my sisters, and my mom. Whenever there's something wrong in my life, my mom is always there to help me. When I grow up, I want to be a girl that is nice, kind, loving, and helpful to other people. I think life is enjoyable because I try to balance out my life by doing everything I need to. And if I have extra time, I like to do things for other people to make them happy. My mom always does nice little things for people. When my mom's friend was going through cancer, she always took her flowers and little presents and left them on her front porch for when she got home every time she had chemo and surgery. My mom went wig shopping with her one day. When she came home, we started talking about it, and I thought it would be great for me to donate my hair to someone that has cancer and is in need of a wig. I love helping people and doing nice things, and this is one way I can make a difference in someone's life. They will put my hair in a couple little ponytails and then cut above the hairband. They will then take my hair and use it to make a wig for a kid who either has cancer or a disease that makes them lose their hair. I want to use my life in a good way by bringing joy into people's lives who need it. As I get older, I want to use my life as an example of doing the right things at the right times. I think that everyone should be kind and loving to everybody, no matter what. Everything they do should be through God, even if it is hard, because you just have to believe in God and know He is going to get you through it.
Isn't that pretty cool? What I want to do now, and then I'm going to kind of talk through this video a little bit. Ushers, would you guys come down? We're going to take our offering now. And what's great about this moment, taking offering, you say, well, that's really cool. You're talking about money and giving, and now you're passing the offering plate, and so all the guilt. But see, do you see how this plays out? See, a lot of you are going, yeah, whatever. I already gave, it's online, it's coming out, it's done, right? So it's not a pressure thing at all. This is not about this, but this is the time that we're going to take our offering, and about 75% of us, I think, that give online now. It is a premeditated thing for so many of you because you're starting to figure out this plan. But let's take a look at Leah for a minute and just look what happened. Leah, this was completely premeditated, wasn't it? She came up with a plan on her own, and it was a good plan. It wasn't the crazy cycle plan. It was a generosity plan. She didn't consume, save, and give what was left. She gave first. I love that so much. So she thought about how she could give away, right? And she thought about her hair. Jesus challenges us to think about 2 of these assumptions that we have quite regularly. A lot of us, and I already mentioned it, think of ourselves as owners of our stuff. And for Leah, that would be her hair. You can say, well, that is her hair. That's her right. It's her hair. But Leah lives differently. She thought about it differently. She didn't think of it as hers to keep, right? The other thing is consumption. In other words, that she would have this all for herself. Ownership, by the way, is a big myth. It's a myth. We're not owners of anything. Jeremiah talked about this last week. Everything we have, I believe, and those of us that are following Jesus have found this to be true, that everything we have comes from him. Scripture says it this way. It says, don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. It's like, hey, don't get screwed up on this one. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father. Don't forget. You might think it's your thing. It's not. And Leah does such a great job. She gets it. She got this hair's not hers. It's not hers. And like I said before, this whole assumption that consumption is the way to go leaves you empty and wanting more. Jesus says, remember that promise I gave at the beginning of the service? You will be happier when we give, when we live a generous life. He says it is more blessed. The word blessed literally means happy, right? It is happier to give than to receive. Did you see a smile on her face when that hair was coming off? At the end of that video, I mean, you could tell she couldn't have been happier. Think about the joy that she had in her heart. And think about the emptiness. I hope you take this the right way, but I've seen this. I've lived a few years of someone relentlessly worrying about their hair. Anybody out there? Relentlessly worrying about your hair, which results in overspending on your hair. Coloring and right? All this stuff. Every morning, standing in front of the mirror, wasting time, hating another day that you are stuck with this hair and this style, right? Now, don't get me wrong. I love it like when Callie goes to get her hair done. I think that's a great thing. But I'm just telling you, haven't you seen where people have been consumed about their hair? Then you look at this little girl. It's not her hair. And she's willing to cut this off for the benefit of another. See, she calculated even how much hair. They got the measuring stick out. This is well thought out. She thought, how much am I going to give? She designated it, right? To that organization who's going to make wigs for kids who have cancer. She did the whole thing. The old crazy cycle, remember? Worry. All worried about money. Oh my gosh. So I overspend for a fix. End up in debt. No margin. And it circles and circles. But how about a new kind of crazy? How about a new kind of crazy? One that starts with peace. And that's why I love the beginning of this video with this little girl. It's just so sweet. You're kind of like, seriously? Could it be that sweet? Is that real? But it was. Wasn't she just centered and peaceful? You had this sense that I think she feels loved by God. I think she feels loved and safe, right, by her parents. She's comfortable with who she is. There's a settledness about her, a peace about her. And out of peace, she gives. And for us that are adults, after we give, then we can save. And after we save, we can live on the rest. Give, save, live. It's the exact opposite of the crazy cycle. Give, save, live. When you do this, everything changes. We stop living like an owner and a consumer. None of our stuff is ours anyway. Remember Jeremiah talked about this last week. How much of our stuff can we take with us? I was thinking, it just hit me. I'd never thought of it this way before, but you know what? You are going to be an incredible giver someday because you're going to give it all away. Every one of us. Why not do it now? Why not share now and be a blessing now? Because you're going to give it all away someday. People will say, you're nuts. You're nuts. Seriously? 10%? You're going to give 10% You're going to give first before you live? Maybe it is crazy, but I'm telling you, I believe it's a better kind of crazy than that other crazy cycle. And for a lot of us in the room, we've never tasted it. It leads us, I would say, to a far better place. Last week, we introduced you to what we're calling a whole 90 challenge. And a lot of you were here last week, a lot of you weren't. Let me just tell you about this real briefly, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But the whole 90 challenge is a challenge, an invitation for you to step out of the crazy cycle, because this is your off-ramp chance right here. The off-ramp chance of getting off that crazy cycle begins with generosity, begins with giving first. And so we're inviting you to give as a first fruit before anything else is done, before you save, before you live, before you consume anything. And we're going to show you a video that Dave and Ann Wilson did. They're pastoring the Orion campus, for those of you who don't know them. And they just have a really great kind of a chat with us sitting on their living room couch. And I just want to show this to you again, and then we'll talk about it a little bit more.